It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. On the way, the tractors bringing Westminster to a standstill once again. Farmers have promised to continue fighting over planned changes to inheritance tax as hundreds descend on central London in protest. Tonight, we'll be joined by one of those farmers to ask what happens next. Also ahead, pure light and joy. The parents of two of the little girls stabbed to death in Southport last summer share memories of their daughters. Plus, the man with Parkinson's who says he feels like he's been cured thanks to a groundbreaking new treatment that's seen him fitted with a computer-controlled brain implant. I'll speak to him and his neurosurgeon. And the explosive discovery in a playground in Northumberland where more than 170 World War II bombs have now been unearthed. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Farmers have once again brought Whitehall to a standstill, bringing their tractors today to the streets of central London in protest against planned changes to inheritance tax. It came as MPs were debating a petition calling for the government to keep the current tax exemptions for working farms. The Prime Minister has insisted there will not be a U-turn. As the government says, plans to introduce a 20% tax on agricultural land worth more than £1 million would only impact a tiny percentage of farms. Sky's Dan Whitehead was there and has our first report this evening.
Back in town, bringing Westminster to a standstill. With inheritance tax firmly in the firing line, farmers from across the UK descended on Downing Street in their latest demonstration against plans they feel could destroy British farming.
Well, I have three sons coming through, and I'm just worried there's going to be nothing left at the end of it for them. The parts of the farm may have to be sold off, to pay the tax.
We just want to feed the nation. We don't want to be millionaires. We just want to carry on farming and let our kids and the next generations do that.
Do you feel that there's a risk that you won't be able to be involved in your parents' farm?
Potentially, yeah. If this carries on, for sure.
And how do you feel about that?
It's scary. It's scary what the future holds.
150,000 signed a petition against the government's plans to introduce a 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million.
There have been 4 or 5 of these big farming protests over the last year. The government isn't budging, but the thing is, neither are they. And every time, it's a bit louder and a bit bigger.
The question is it enough?
We will continue, and every time we come back, and we will get bigger, and we're getting more united, and we will continue all the way along. We're at the beginning of a parliament. So I'm not going to be put off by the government still saying the lady's not returning.
There is talk of the threshold being increased to £10 million to help smaller farms, something government sources deny. They insist the current plans are fair and balanced. But Reform leader Nigel Farage and all opposition parties are making capital out of this issue.
These people are not going to stop. And if you understand that, then you recognise the government are the ones that are going to have to stop.
As Parliament debated the issue, farmers watched on in the rain. This is as much about where our food comes from as it is complicated tax arrangements. For Tom and son Bert, it's also about ensuring the next generation has a chance to farm.
That's the only reason me and my wife are carrying on with the farm and managing the debt and taking it on from the previous generation, is to try and secure the ownership of it, or keeping it there, for Bert and all the other cousins and all the other family members.
There is little more than a year till the controversial inheritance tax kicks in. You get the feeling this won't be the last time that farmers swap countryside for the city. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Westminster.
I'm joined now by Jacob Walker, a farmer who was at that protest today, and you will remember him. He came into the studio back in November now.
Yes.
That's gone really quickly, hasn't it?
Massively
the first
quickly,
protest in Westminster, and you've kindly agreed to come back in and speak to us today after this protest. I have to admit, Jacob, in those 3 months, it doesn't feel like anything's changed.
I partially agree. I think that we've gained quite a bit of public support.
Yeah.
And I think that within there's obviously several groups that are rallying against this, and I think that we've got the message across, and I think that we've won the kind of the tax side of the argument. We've just got to try and get the government on board at the same time, as well as the public support.
Because it keeps coming down to this sticking point, isn't it? And I'm sure all farmers now, well, you were before sort of becoming tax experts, such as the nature of your industry, but even more so now. And it just keeps coming back to this argument where the government is saying, look, with these allowances, X, Y, and Z, it creeps up. So actually, a very small percentage of farmers will be affected by this change in inheritance tax. Looking at those numbers of people down there, you guys strongly disagree with this. What kind of numbers do you think it will affect? Will it affect you personally?
The latest study that I think was done in the last couple of weeks was 75%. So obviously, massive increase on the 30% or so that the government think it's going to be.
Hugely at odds with what the government is saying.
And I think that ultimately, when you look at the government and the fact that, you know, between their own government departments with DEFRA and the other agencies, they can't actually decide between themselves on what numbers that they actually are. So rather than listening to the people in the field, you know, the various farming, NFU and other departments, they're just trying to clutch at straws and say that actually it's 3 million when it starts at 1 million. And ultimately, if the stars align, you get the 3 million. But for the vast majority, you're not going to get the 3 million. You're going to be at the baseline 1 million. For me personally, it's difficult to say. It depends on how long my grandfather lives, and depends on what the market, how the market varies and how the market plays and how much we build the business between now and obviously his passing, because it's not just the agricultural property relief, it's also business relief as well. So
much to take into account when you're trying to run a really difficult business at the moment. It's worth reminding people watching at home, you know, you had to take, well, you and thousands of other farmers had to take the day off work today. It's not a big jolly up in London.
No, it's a massive dedication.
Putting the farm on hold almost, or putting the responsibility on other people's shoulders for 24 hours so you can come down here. What's it like running your farm at the moment? Just how tough is it?
I think that, you know, there's a lot of talk about inflation. I think that all of our input costs have gone up with inflation. And the only thing that hasn't gone up with inflation...
Yours isn't an industry immune to that, is it?
No, the only thing that's not gone up inflation is obviously what we sell on. You know, you look at a litre of milk, it's the same price it was 10 years ago. You look at 10 kilos worth of beef, it's much the same as what it was 10 years ago, and yet the input costs to make that has skyrocketed with inflation, and yet our profits just haven't.
What about the stress it's putting on you and your young family? I just met your wife before we came on air, and your little boy, Hunter, just 9 months.
It's a worry, isn't it? I mean, you know, ultimately we're doing it for little return, and we weren't here before this change in relief, so we weren't rallying against the fact that we're not making any money, because we enjoy what we do and we do it for the next generation. So then it makes you sit there and think,
you're not in it to turn a profit, and I hear that from so many farmers. You're not really in it to
in it so
I can, a fortune.
You know, eventually pass it to my son should he wish to do that. You know, and ultimately you then sit there and you think, well, what's the point? If he's going to lose 20% of that, where do you draw the line between you're doing something for the next generation, but ultimately the government want a piece of that, and it's more, I think, land than it is the money. But
you feel like you've won the tax argument, the government just aren't listening. What about the buying and producing British produce in this country? I mean, you know, after the first protest, a lot of the major supermarket chains came out to back farmers, Waitrose, Tesco, Aldi and the like. Government's still not listening to that. What would you say to them about the future of British produce in terms of, you know, talking about feeding the nation? I've seen the slogan, Sir Keir Starmer, don't bite the hand that feeds. Why is buying, producing, eating British produce so important?
I think you've only got to look at World War II to understand that importing your food, any vast quantity of food, and you're relying on imports, is not a good place for any nation to be at, really, because you don't know what's in the future, whether World War III could ever happen or whatever. So you would think that we'd learn from our previous mistakes, but clearly they're not taking into account what happened previously.
And all this, there is an argument to say, you know, farming needs to modernise, it needs to move with the times. You're already doing that, aren't you?
I would agree, yeah. You can't not move with the times. I think that the argument of moving with the times is just buying them some time, I think, personally.
Jacob, how long is this going to continue for?
How long's a piece of string? I think that ultimately I think personally they may back down on the BPR relief. I think they might.
Remind us what BPR is again?
Business property relief. I think they're going to back down on that because if they don't, they're going to lose too many seats. They're going to lose too many votes, basically. And I think that's what it comes down to. The agricultural property relief, I'm 50-50. I don't. Time will tell. But the one thing I do know is that we're very resilient as farmers, and we will just keep coming back.
And very loud and getting your points across
and very
today.
bigger, and you know we filled Whitehall and some today. So every time it's getting larger. You know, it's a bit of an embarrassment on the government to have that outside their doors, but...
OK. Well, listen, Jacob, really appreciate you coming in again
so
with your young family, staying in London late to talk to us tonight. But such is the cause you are fighting for. We really appreciate it, Jacob. Good luck, and we'll talk again in the future, I know it.
Yes,
OK, thank you, Jacob. Now, the families of two of the little girls killed in the Southport attacks last summer have called for a public inquiry to hold people to account, as they said they hope other children can be protected. The parents of Elsie Stankham and BB King described their daughters as pure light and pure joy, so brave. They were speaking to ITV's Good Morning Britain, as our Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milan reports.
It was a privilege to be a mum. I was so proud of her. The effort that she put in everything, the love that she gave, not just us, her friends, her teachers, her nature, was so pure. She was fearless in a sense.
Oh, she was so brave.
Yeah.
She was really, really brave.
The parents of Elsie Stankham want the world to know about the daughter they knew, the daughter taken from them on that summer's day in Southport.
What goes through your head as Elsie's dad?
Guilt. Like, anger. Like, that's just something that I've got to deal with.
And there's lots that's gone over and said, oh, we should never have sent her. But she wanted to go so much. And I think we've spoke about it a lot, and we've said she was in the right place and where she wanted to be.
Yeah, Elsie and all the kids there had every right to be there and every right to feel safe.
But if we hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened. I might not be here, but I would never have let that happen.
You'd fight to the death for your children, wouldn't you?
Yeah. 100%. God, I'd swap with Elsie any day.
Whether what happened could have been prevented is for a public inquiry they've welcomed. The hope it could spare another family. As for the prison sentence handed to Elsie's murderer...
It doesn't make us feel any better. If you're asking me, the number's massive, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't change how I feel. If he spends the rest of his life in jail, it doesn't bring back Elsie, does it?
BB King's family also want the world to see the girl they knew.
You know, she was a human being. She was a beautiful, funny, crazy, gorgeous girl, and her legacy, it can't be defined by what's happened. And I've got to make sure that people knew that she isn't defined by this. She was pure light. She was pure joy.
She was just so full of love, but we were just so close, and we'd do all kinds of things. We just normal things, but it was so precious, and we've got to hold on to those.
Well, we thought that whatever she did, she was going to move mountains. She literally was. And I really, really hope that this isn't all for nothing. Yeah. And in spirit, she can still have an impression on the world, and she can help just the future, protecting children.
The families agree that out of what happened to Elsie, BB and Alice Aguiar, some good must come.
We'll always be Elsie's mum and dad, and no one will ever take that away from us. And we've always said from the start that we won't let evil win this. So we have started, and it was quite early on, we started a charity called Elsie's Story. And we feel like it's our duty as her mum and dad to continue writing Elsie's story for her. It's given us purpose. It can't be in vain. I won't allow it. Whether that's through change in the public inquiry or whether that's making through Elsie's story. I always want to do it proud, don't we?
An NHS trust has admitted it failed to provide safe care and treatment to 3 babies who died within days of their births. The Care Quality Commission charged Nottingham University hospitals over the deaths, which all occurred in 2021. Amelia Harper joins us in the studio now with more on this story. So, Amelia, talk us through the developments today and what's going to happen to this hospital trust.
So this trust today has admitted to exposing 3 babies and their mothers to a significant risk of avoidable harm. Now, these were charges brought by the Care Quality Commission. You might know them better as the CQC. That's the health watchdog in England. And the trust was facing 6 charges in connection with the deaths of the babies. The CQC had said they failed to provide safe care for the babies and their mothers. And today in court, they pled guilty to those charges. And just to set up how we got here, if you're not familiar with the families involved, these were 3 babies and their mothers who all died within 14 weeks of each other back in 2021. They were all under the care of the maternity services at the trust. They were called Adele O'Sullivan, Kalani Rawson and Quinn Parker. And the court heard how there were serious and systemic failings in relation to their case. Lawyers on behalf of the trust have apologised to those affected. They have said they offer their profound apologies and regrets to those affected. They also say improvements have been made, including hiring more midwives and providing staff with further training.
This is all in the context of the maternity services review led by the midwife Donna Ockenden that has been going on for some time now. Beginning of last year, they expanded their scope of review into Nottingham maternity failings. Where are we in the context of that review? Because Donna Ockenden, you know, focusing in on the East Midlands, but she has looked at other areas of the country as well.
Well, first, I think it's important to actually say that this is the first time ever that the CQC has prosecuted the same NHS trust more than once. So back in 2023, the trust was fined over £800,000 in relation to failings that they admitted with regards to care of a baby who was just 23 minutes old in 2019. But you ask about this wider review. This is the trust at the heart of the largest inquiry into maternity services in NHS history, chaired by the former midwife Donna Ockenden, looking into maternity services. And at the moment, so many more families have come forward. The number of families actually has risen to over 2,000 that are being involved in this. It's meant that the publication of the final report has now been delayed until 2026. So this is not the first time that this trust has found itself in hot water. It may find itself continuing to be in hot water, but it will be sentenced on Wednesday.
OK. Thank you very much, Amelia Harper, there with the latest on that story. Still to come here on the UK tonight, the government looks to get tough on illegal immigration, but will it stop reform's rise in the polls? Also ahead, the Archbishop of York apologises for safeguarding failures in the church as he resists calls to resign. And the explosive discovery in a children's playground in Northumberland. More than 170 World War II bombs have now been found.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of heat. Still,
we were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
The government says it has deported nearly 19,000 people with no right to be in the UK since coming to power. The Home Office says those removed include failed asylum seekers, foreign criminals and other immigration offenders, and claims 600 people were detained just last month. Sky's political correspondent Rob Powell has more details.
Early morning in late January, footage released by the Home Office shows almost 50 people being loaded onto a government deportation flight. Half are foreign national offenders, and some who pose a higher risk have been restrained as they're led on board.
The rules really need to be respected and enforced for the asylum and immigration system to work. That's why since the election, we have been increasing returns, so 19,000 people who have no right to be in the UK have now been returned, and also increasing the illegal working raids and going after the employers who are exploiting migrant workers.
This is what those raids look like, with a record number of arrests now resulting from them, all aimed at discouraging illegal migration. But there's a political aim too.
Nigel Farage in the House.
Nigel Farage's Reform Party has been on the march in the polls and striking a hardline tone on immigration. And this is why the government is worried. Reform finished second in 98 constituencies in last year's general election. 90% of these were won by Labour, mainly seats in the party's traditional heartlands in the north and Wales. And they include Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's seat, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's seat, and Wolverhampton South East, held by Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden. Voters in that Midlands seat not yet impressed by Labour.
Still struggling to get it all sorted, ain't they? With this immigration thing they're trying to get in place. They still keep coming in.
Just very dissatisfied with the government and the opposition.
So there's more people voting for reform now. It needs to be sorted out, doesn't it? The country's in a mess.
It's that disillusionment the Home Office is trying to dispel by shouting about any successes they notch up.
Sources here say the increase in enforcement activity is partly down to staff being moved across from working on the old Tory government's Rwanda policy. But there still hasn't been any sustained drop in small boat arrivals, and trying to fight reform on their own turf carries risks too.
This former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn says it's a doomed strategy.
Labour aren't going to out-reform reform. It isn't a vote-winning strategy. If you shift further and further into anti-migrant politics from the centre or the so-called centre-left, you don't reduce the salience of those issues, you drive them up. What they should be doing if they want to show that they're improving people's lives is actually improving people's lives.
Ministers will shoulder some internal criticism over this approach if it means hanging on to wavering voters. Eyes already on the next election and the political threats on the horizon. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
The Archbishop of York has admitted that he's made mistakes, but today he vowed to change the Church of England after a series of safeguarding failures. Stephen Cotterill has resisted calls to resign and apologised for the crisis, insisting he can lead the Church before the appointment of the next Archbishop of Canterbury. Mr Cotterill has been under increasing pressure in recent months after being accused of not acting quickly enough over claims of abuse by priest David Tudor. Sky's Communities correspondent Lisa Holland reports.
Gatherings of the Church of England are generally more staid affairs. Instead, the Church began its week-long General Synod, the meeting of the members of its ruling Parliament, shrouded in division and torment over the way it handles allegations of abuse following a string of scandals.
How do you feel the mood is going in today to this Synod? Oh, probably a bit anxious. Just because there's an awful lot that's really important, and it's important we get it right, so we don't want the moment to pass.
O God, make speed to save us.
Inside the Synod, the calm and comfort of prayer stood in contrast to an unexpected vote on whether the chamber would even hear the central address from the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cotterill. Now the Church's most senior figure after the resignation in disgrace of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, Stephen Cotterill has himself faced calls to quit over his handling of alleged abuse cases.
And all of us, and I assure you, I begin with myself, must be subject to proper processes of accountability. I have long believed that greater independence is the missing piece in the safeguarding jigsaw, delivering the accountability and transparency we need, particularly in the area of scrutiny.
The Archbishop of York has said actions speak louder than words, but he is also facing questions from within the Church over whether he is the person to lead them through this crisis.
But there are fears the week could end without enough substantive change.
Nothing that I've seen so far is going to make a difference to victims and survivors of church abuse. So it's yet to be seen whether the General Synod can turn that kind of feeling of sadness and shock and sorrow into some kind of action.
On Tuesday, the Church will vote on new proposals for safeguarding, measures which may or may not send a message that it is ready for change. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Central London.
Still to come on the programme, I'll speak to the man with Parkinson's who says he feels like he's been cured thanks to a groundbreaking new treatment. And I'll be joined by a lifelong Plymouth Argyle fan as they are rewarded with a trip to Man City after their incredible FA Cup results against Premier League leaders Liverpool yesterday. After producing the biggest shock so far in this year's FA Cup, Plymouth Argyle have been rewarded with a mouth-watering tie against reigning Premier League champions Manchester City in the 5th round. The Championship strugglers turned giant killers, knocking out Liverpool yesterday in a hard-fought 1-0 win. Well, I'm very pleased to say that Greg Foxsmith, chair of the Plymouth Argyle Supporters Association London branch, joins us in the studio. Greg, delighted to have you in here tonight to bask in the glory of Plymouth Argyle, the underdogs winning at the weekend. You were actually at the game, right?
I was at the game and I haven't stopped smiling since. I think you can tell the Plymouth fans today, whether they're in London or Plymouth, we're not just by the scarf, but by our huge smiles.
Yeah, huge smiles, green scarf. Bit of a sore head? You went to work today.
And yes, you can see I've come straight from work. It was a challenge, yeah. It was a late finish to get back, but we don't get days like that very often. So
no,
I think work would be forgiving.
Yeah, you last beat Liverpool over 60 years ago, I was reading.
I wasn't there for that one.
Wasn't there? No, not at all. In fact, you know, lots of fans will have heard about that, not been there, so this is a real moment to savour. And just in terms of, you know, looking at some of the chatter amongst the fans today, some of them knew something might be up when the Liverpool team was announced, because Arne Slot made 10 changes, which some of you saw as a bit disrespectful. So it sounds like Plymouth were up for this one.
They were absolutely up for it. I mean, we don't have the same size of squad or the expense of players that Liverpool have got, but we have got the heart. And yes, they made 10 changes, but that was still a team full of internationals. Many of their players cost more than our entire team.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe only disrespectful to the Liverpool fans who travelled all the way for that game, not to see some of their key players perform. But for Plymouth fans, we didn't care. That was Liverpool. We took the scalp.
Yeah, it's very generous of you, though, to show sympathy to their fans having travelled all that way. And just in terms of the atmosphere, because you'd seen off Brentford, right? Another big Premier League high flyer. Then Liverpool. Talk to me about the atmosphere in the stadium.
Well, Brentford was away. That was a great... we've sold out the away end. That was an enormous, cracking atmosphere. But at Home Park, yeah, it was rocking.
Yeah.
It was really noisy. People were up for it right from the very beginning. And, you know, frankly, we've had a terrible season for Plymouth Argyle in the league. We're currently bottom.
It's good concentrating on the Cup.
Yeah, we're unbeaten against the Premier League. So when we got Man City in the next round, we're up for that. No Premier League holds any fear for us now.
Yeah, and it's at Manchester City, so you're going to head up to the northwest for that one.
Yeah, it'll be quite a trek up to the northwest, but we'll certainly be there in numbers. And, you know, with our league struggles, we'll probably rest a couple of players. We're not, you know, but we'll still be fine.
Yeah. Fancy your chances? Because,
Absolutely.
you know, the giant killers is the term, isn't it, in the FA Cup?
I think so, and it's all about momentum. We're on a roll. We saw Man City struggle against Leyton Orient, so I think we'll take it to them.
Yeah, Man City are having a few troubles of their own at the moment, aren't they? And you're a lifetime fan, been supporting Argyle since the 80s. A lot of people at this stage of the competition, if their team isn't in it, they like to back the underdogs, don't they? And Plymouth Argyle are certainly sort of living up to that tag. So give us the big sell on Plymouth Argyle. Why are they such a great team? Why have you followed them for all this time?
I think you missed the bit where I was a lifelong suffering fan. But yes, we are so up for this. And I think you're right, that most English football fans always have a little support for the underdog, as Plymouth do when we see other teams playing. In fact, we noticed that Exeter, our rivals, are playing tomorrow against Nottingham Forest, so we're expecting them to win and set it up for a Devon derby in the final at Wembley. But we don't have... what we would say is that we have a lot of friends across the country. We don't really make rivals, we just make friends, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of support for Plymouth on our journey.
Well, what a game it's going to be heading up to Manchester City. You talked there about the final. I love the fact that you've already got your eye on the final. Can you just talk to me about how your family have reacted to that? Oh, who's this you're photographed with there? Who's that?
So that's myself and my friend Matt, and we're both suffering fans. But you can see a different look on our faces there from our norm. So we're very much, we're very much looking to have more joy along the way on this journey.
Yeah, looking to replicate that photo at Manchester City Stadium.
And actually, you know, in 83-84, Plymouth Argyle, then in the 3rd division, did get to the semi-final with the FA Cup. So this year, it's just one stage further.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Bit of history there. You're going to go one stage further. Could I trouble you for a score prediction against Manchester City? How confident are you feeling on that?
Well, I think if we do rest a couple of our players, we'll just win comfortably, let's say 2-0.
Oh, right, OK. I'm going to write that down and hold it to you, Greg.
Thank you.
OK, Greg, thank you so much for coming in to see us there. That's Greg Foxsmith, Chair of the Plymouth Argyle Supporters Association, London branch. Really good to have your company. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank
We'll
you.
be following your team's progress. We're adopting Plymouth Argyle here on the UK Tonight. Can we do that? Yeah, my producer says we can. There you go. It's our team for the cup. Right, OK. A man from Sunderland says he feels like he's been cured of Parkinson's disease. This is after becoming one of the first people in the world to receive a groundbreaking new treatment. He is Kevin Hill, and he began to develop symptoms when he was in his 40s and was diagnosed in 2017. But now the 65-year-old has been fitted with a brain implant that's controlled by a computer in his chest. It carries electrical messages to control his symptoms. And I'm very glad to say that Kevin joins me now alongside Dr. Akbar Hussain, a neurosurgeon at Newcastle's Royal Victoria Infirmary, one of only 4 hospitals in the world offering this implant. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both this evening for what is a really remarkable story. Kevin, I'm going to come to you first, if I may. Perhaps you can tell us what life was like before this. How did Parkinson's affect you?
Well, Parkinson's affects different people in different ways, and with me, it was the tremor. I found it very hard to live with. It's a constant reminder that there was something wrong with you. And it affects you in lots of different ways. My sleep pattern, it was affecting my mood. I was fatigued.
And when you had this procedure, the impact was immediate, I understand.
It was, yes. We were in the consulting room and the wired us up with the computer, pressed a few buttons and I just stopped shaking out. It was unbelievable. I was in shock. My wife was standing across the other side of the room crying her eyes out.
Yeah, Kevin, it was quite remarkable, the effect. It was almost instant. Let's bring in Mr. Hussain. This is a new treatment called deep brain stimulation. I explained in a rudimentary fashion how this works. Perhaps you could go into a bit more detail.
Deep brain stimulation itself has been around for a couple of decades. So that treatment itself is not new. What's new is that we keep having innovations that come through, new technology, better recharge capabilities, smaller computers, which give us more and more capabilities as we're going through the years. And as Newcastle University and Newcastle Hospitals, we've been part of the leading edge of this innovation with the BrainSense device that's been launched by Medtronic. For the first time, not only can you send signals to the brain to help modulate the symptoms and help patients, where you can also read from the patient's brain as well, and you can actually pick up the abnormal signals. And by picking up the abnormal signals, we are able to see how we're directly affecting the patient with a sort of closed feedback loop. And that's a new part of it. For in the past, we were only able to deliver stimulation to the brain, but for the first time, we're able to actually read from the brain. And by reading from the brain, it means that I'm able to set the computer up to continuously read 24/7, and if the abnormal signals go too high, I can set the computer in the chest wall up to increase the stimulation to help Kevin. And if the stimulation goes too low, and the oscillations go too low, I can help the computer wind itself back, and this will happen automatically. And this is the first time we've had this kind of device available to us to use in Parkinson's patients. The only way that we could have done anything like this in the past is if I went and lived with Kevin. And he's a lovely bloke, and that would be a nice thing to do, but I've got plenty of other things to do. So the only way that would have been happened in the past is if I was there with him. But now, finally, we've got an opportunity where I can have this device where I can set it up. He can go away. So instead of us changing things every 4 months or every 6 months, it can change every 10 minutes, every hour, to help give him the best settings for the morning when he wakes up versus the best settings for in the evening when he's having his dinner. And that's the new part of it.
Yeah, Kevin, that must have such a positive effect on not just your life, but your family's life. Because as you said, symptoms of Parkinson's are different for different people. But also, you'll have different symptoms throughout the day, depending on how tired you are, for example. So talk to me about the things you can do now that you couldn't before.
I like to go out and ride my bike and get riding my bike now. I was having difficulty before because there were pains in my shoulders and my aches and pains. and I was very fatigued.
And I hear your wife allows you back in the kitchen now.
Yeah, I was barred from the kitchen because I was chopping and tipping my finger off and dropping things and forgetting to turn the gas off.
Yeah. And so just for your family, this is a huge development as well, to be able to have you back into family life.
Yeah, well, my son's in Australia and I'm going over shortly to see him, and I don't think it would have been possible without his DBS.
Yeah.
So I owe it a fortune.
Yeah, that's incredible. Luckily, you've not had to have Dr. Akbar Hussein moving in with you, but just in case you're going to the other side of the world for a holiday. How does that work, Dr. Hussein, in terms of keeping that programme updated while he's away? As you said, you can now do it remotely, such are the developments. But, you know, Kevin is close to the hospital where he is now. What's that going to be like if he goes to the other side of the world?
Usually when we get the patient on a good setting, we can let them go home, and they're quite well stabilised. And we give the patient some autonomy because they're allowed to have a device at home with them, a bit like a mobile phone, which gives them a couple of different programs. So one program might be good for certain situations, another program might be good for another situation. So he can have he can manipulate the stimulation himself if needs be. Worst case scenario, if he has a problem when he's over in Australia, he just needs to call us and we're able to give him some advice over the phone and help him get it right. But once we've got people settled, they're usually completely fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's so remarkable. The computer essentially is in Kevin's chest. There's 2 wires that thread up the back of his neck to an implant in his brain that's about the size of a grain of rice. In the UK, it's estimated over 150,000 people are living with the disease. That number is set to go up. Potentially, could this be a good fit for all of those living with Parkinson's? Is that the long-term aim?
So this is known as a Parkinson's advanced therapy, and there's multiple different advanced therapies out there for people with Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders. We do think that the amount of people that could benefit from this therapy is a lot more than what we get referred through to us as neurosurgeons or neurologists in this field. Hopefully with this media exposure, more people will go to their neurologists and their clinicians and say, is this right for me? And can we be referred through so that people who could benefit will benefit?
Well, listen, it's been so great to have you both on to talk about this incredibly exciting innovation. Dr. Akbar Hussein, thank you. And congratulations on developing this. And Kevin Hill, a new lease of life on your bike and heading to Australia, both of them quite literally. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful story, absolutely wonderful. Still to come here on the programme, we're going to tell you about a bombshell discovery in a children's playground in Northumberland. That's on the way. And we're also going to be talking about sporting rivalries. This is after Pep Guardiola claimed Manchester City and Real Madrid is the biggest in European football.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, we'll hear about the explosive discovery in a children's playground in Northumberland. But first, Chris Latcham is here with the sport, and we're going to talk about sporting rivalries. This is after Pep Guardiola said that Manchester City, Real Madrid is the biggest rivalry in European football right now. Is that right?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it was put to him by a Spanish reporter that this is the modern Clásico. Now, Pep Guardiola used to manage Barcelona.
Yeah.
So Barcelona against Real Madrid is El Clásico. So he knows all about big rivalries, managing Manchester City as well. He's had rivalries with Manchester United, with Liverpool, with Jurgen Klopp, and with Arsenal, with Mikel Arteta. But when you look back at the last few seasons, this is the 4th season in a row that Real Madrid and Manchester City have gone head-to-head in this competition, which many people will say is the competition. Real Madrid see it as that. At the start of the season, the only thing they have to win is the Champions League. That is always their aim, and that's where Manchester City want to get. So Pep made the point. He said, in terms of history, we can't compare to Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, AC Milan, all the trophies that they've won. But recently... At
this point in time...
This is the one. And the fact, when you look back at the 3 previous seasons when they've met, the winner of this fixture has gone on to lift the Champions League trophy.
OK.
So it's a real bellwether of which way the wind is blowing in Europe, except maybe for this season, because this is the first ever knockout playoff. They've repurposed the Champions League. There's a bigger group stage, and these two teams didn't do particularly well. So that's why they're meeting at this stage of the competition instead of last season when it was the semis, the season before when it was the semis, or the season before that when it was the quarterfinals. So it's earlier than we would like to see it. I think many people would like to see both of them go further into the competition, but I don't think he's far wrong when he says it does define the modern Champions League.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the Plymouth Argyle fan we had in the studio just before you, who they're playing Manchester City in the 5th round of the FA Cup. I think he'd argue that that's a really big rivalry coming up in the FA Cup. But in terms of the biggest sporting rivalries, what do you think when we talk about that in terms of football? You've gone through sort of Real Madrid against various teams, El Clásico being one. But when you think about top football teams going up against each other, United, City, I mean, that's still fairly recent, that sort of big rivalry in terms of, you know, on
the
top
I live in Manchester,
level.
So I don't want to offend anyone. I think the Manchester derby is huge. I've been to one of them.
Yeah.
I went to an Old Firm derby about 15 years ago at Ibrox, Rangers Stadium, in the Celtic end.
Oh, wow.
And the atmosphere, I don't think I'll ever experience it at any live sport ever again. But they don't do that anymore in Scotland.
No.
You don't have away fans, which is a real shame. So for me, I'm going to say the Ashes. They hold it back every 2 years.
Yeah.
The Ashes Test Series is the one that is the pinnacle for me.
Oh, I used to like a bit of Federer and Nadal in the tennis. That was always great. The household I grew up in, it was always Arsenal, Tottenham as well, North London derby. Oh, Tottenham. I think that's out there enough now.
It's Tottenham, so you don't win many. OK, right.
Yeah. Oh, and we're not having a great time at the moment. But anyway, moving swiftly on.
Before I lose any more fans, let's focus on the rest of the sport, shall we?
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I've had a wonderful career in football, but now I want to give something back. I want to help our game's young players.
Whether you do or don't make it, you're prepared for life itself.
One player makes it, then I've done my job.
This time I'm looking at other ways we can support our younger footballers.
I still have them dreams that normal parents have.
It's exciting to know that you've got a child who actually has a love for something and wants to pursue it.
Have you not owned it yet? No.
Southampton's academy has an incredible record of producing talent. And one of the biggest success stories has recently rejoined the club. But could there be another Adam Lallana making his name in red and white in the future?
I'm just like a normal parent. I'm excited that my lad's in the system. I'm probably more excited watching his games than I'm playing my games now.
I'm a very fortunate parent that I have support as well. So when I can't take Arthur, I've got, whether it's my wife or grandparents, and I know a lot of parents, don't have access to that, aren't able to get the time off work. So it can become stressful for the parents. When parents become stressed, at times they won't know they're doing it, but they put more pressure on the kids. There's an external pressure of making it professionally, which is extremely unrealistic. The football club do a lot to help parents, giving them money per mile for the travelling, and that should happen. There probably should be even more in place, because it only takes one.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now to a bombshell discovery in Northumberland, where more than 170 World War II explosives have been found under a children's playground. The first of the devices, which still contain a charge, was discovered in Wooler in January, before being followed by much larger finds. It's thought the area was used as a Home Guard training ground, and the ordnance was buried there at the end of the war. Well, I'm joined now by Mark Mather from Northumberland County Council. Good of you to join us this evening, Councillor. Thank you so much. This is quite a startling discovery. It started at the beginning of last year. Talk to us about what's been uncovered and how this all began.
Yeah, so the parish council was working in the next round of regenerative projects in the town to put an all-inclusive play park in. The work started early January, and it was on the 14th of January we got the first call from the contractors to say that they'd thought they'd discovered a bomb. And the story kind of started there.
Yeah, didn't just discover one, went on to discover 170 and possibly more. What's happened to the area? Of course, this is a children's play park in what I understand to be a residential area. Talk to me about what the implications have been.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite seriously impacted the area. We had to put in a 50-metre cordon around the site when the Army bomb disposal team came out to the first one on the first day and then the second bomb the next day. Sadly, after that, the Army weren't able to support us going forward, and we were told we had to employ a private contractor, a bomb disposal team, to come in. And we thought that it would last 2 days, was our opinion, because we couldn't have any more than two. But on the first day, we found a further 65. And then after day two, we were up to 155. So the work spread into a fortnight of detection and removal, which we're in the middle of now. But we're up to 176 of these between 9 and 11.5 pound training devices. Like I say, still carry a charge, so have to be treated as a live device and as potentially hazardous.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine a private bomb disposal team does not come cheap for the parish council, but the local council has stepped in. What's the plan for the park in the future?
Yeah, so we're taking this absolutely seriously, and we're going to make sure that once the team leave, that we have a certificate to say that park's 100% safe. We still are going to move ahead and put the new all-inclusive play equipment in, because that was our aspirations. And like I say, fantastic local authorities stepped in and said that because it's a part of this regenerative vision that we have for the town, they're going to cover the extended costs, which currently are looking between 30 and 40,000. But depending on what else we find, we just don't know. It could continue to go up, and we're having more finds every day of different types of explosives or kind of World War II memorabilia.
Oh, well, listen, once it's safe and back up and running, a great place for children to play and an educational site as well, with what's been going on there. Mark Mather, Councillor Mark Mather from Northumberland County Council, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this story. A total of 176 World War II bombs discovered under that children's play park in Northumberland. That's all from us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Up next, it is The World with Yalda Hakeem. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.